Hey, Lindsay.
Good morning. How are you?
I got in early to get a good parking spot.
You got the best view. It's a good
Close
spot
to
to be
the
in.
close to the door. We just anticipate technical problems.
No, I'm crossing my fingers that not today.
No, Karen said she was going to be joining at 9:30.
Yes. I was,
So
well, yeah, that should still be plenty of time prior to that session, right?
yes, I imagine. I don't think things will go that fast.
Morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Just FYI, I'm going to be meeting with Drew Hazelton later today about the EMS thing we discussed.
Very cool. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, he was going to be in the area, so we're going to meet at Norwich.
Nice.
He's here. Get a FaceTime. I do enough of the computer stuff.
There's certainly a difference in person versus online.
Yeah. Gonna have to get you a helicopter down there.
I can go grab it.
Do you have one? You don't.
Yeah, hang on.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you go. Beautiful.
Way to cover it up.
You got to scratch out police and put sheriff in there.
Clever.
Morning, folks.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. Good weekend and busy week. Can't ask for much more.
True.
Hey, Lindsay, I have a question for you.
Yes.
All the chairs that we use at graduation, do we own those or rent those?
We own those.
Awesome. So if we were to have like a double graduation where you had a graduation and then 2 hours later you could run a second academy graduation, leaving all this set up there and everything, and it wouldn't cost anything?
Correct.
Awesome. I only ask because we have a couple of academy classes in COVID that did not get a graduation, and their families did not get a chance to pin their
Yep.
badge or do any of those things. And I had a couple of officers reach out saying that, it's probably the only full-time academy they'll ever go through, and that's a really significant thing, and they missed the graduation because of COVID. And there was some discussion about, is there a way we could we do it? Could we maybe not set up a new graduation date for them, but maybe on one of the graduations, have a, a day graduation like we normally do, leave everything set up, and then come back and do a night graduation. That would be for those COVID classes, right? Like you could come back with your family. It's not the same thing for sure, but would give them that moment where they got to walk across the stage and be together as a group. So I said, well, I said, it's probably going to come down to the rental cost, right? Like how much is it going to cost for setting the place up? But
No, we're very lucky in that the only thing we rent is pipe and drape, and that's like an overnight rental, so it's not like.
so it's
Yeah,
in the
I think
realm
we
of
have it for a few days.
possibility. We could totally run an
Yeah.
evening graduation for folks. Huh.
How many are we talking about? How many do you think would attend? How many classes? How many potential folks? Roughly.
So
It was 2 or 3 classes. We did, I mean, yeah, I think it would have been 3, maybe more, just because we did a graduation here, but no families attended. And then I think there were 2 that were canceled.
So I mean, potentially 60 or so recruits. I think it's certainly more than that, but I'm trying to think of like people. Some people would have no interest in attending, but you could have at least 60 or
Right.
so interested.
Well, what I've seen happen with universities, and we did it at Norwich, we had groups that couldn't attend, and invited them to, with notice, participate in future graduations of their choice. So it wouldn't necessarily just be one specific event. So we've had them trickle in over several years, and then include them in the regular ceremony rather than a special ceremony. Have them come in and walk, if you will, and do all the other elements. I'd say probably it was about 25% of those came back and did it. Now we're talking about greater distances and etc. But I think it's a great idea
Yeah.
if it could be done. And to the extent, I don't know whether a separate ceremony were wanted, but if they could be incorporated into the existing ceremony.
I think it's hard, certainly. There's a camaraderie you create with these folks that you've
Yeah.
spent,
Yeah.
weeks on time together. And I think, there's a unique balance, and just my personal opinion, there's unique balance there. If you don't want to take away from the existing academies, right, who've built this strong bond, and then throwing somebody in last minute. And I also think with those 3 separate academies, even though they're separate academies, they all share one common, that COVID bond, right? And
Yeah.
I think there might actually be enough folks who'd be interested to run, if we didn't, everything's already there, and just say, hey, we're going to do an evening academy graduation, bring some people in. Just a thought. Like I said, I'm just spitballing because there's a lot of people in the room, and wanted to see what others' thoughts were on it.
Great idea. I like it. Having said that, do we, Lindsay, do we have a quorum?
We do have a quorum.
Okay, then we can officially begin the meeting, 9:03 a.m. Well, good morning, everybody. We have a fairly robust agenda this morning, a number of items, and I know we'll have some good discussion. Are there any additions to the agenda that anybody would like to, or deletions that need to be made? Okay, seeing none, we will continue. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the September 4th meeting that were distributed earlier. Do we have a motion? Mark Anderson, thank you. Do we have a second?
Trevor would second.
Chief Frank. Okay. The motion is moved. Do we have any discussion, amendments for the minutes? Any changes, alterations? I didn't see any, and apparently neither is the group. So hearing none, we'll move to vote. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All of those.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the The motion passes. Thank you. Okay, moving on to next item on our agenda. It is a stipulation agreement, docket number 202, 20S53. I'm going to turn this over to Kim McManus for an overview of the document you received, and stress that the any questions about that are about the document you received at this, with the potential for a need to go into executive session to go any further following Kim's overview. Before we begin, I see Amanda Garces has a hand up.
Oh, sorry, that was the approval of the
Votes. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Kim, I'll turn over the overview to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, council members. Before you, as Chair Clemens stated, there is a stipulated agreement in the matter PRS 2020 S53. This is a Category B second offense professional conduct complaint. This officer in the summer of 2019 had 2 conduct complaints investigated by his agency, the Vermont State Police. Those investigations were completed and submitted to the council. The Professional Regulation Subcommittee found that there was evidence to support 2 separate Category B violations. Just as a reminder for newer council members, for the majority of first offense Category B conduct complaints, even when the Professional Regulation Subcommittee finds that there's evidence to support that complaint, most of those complaints are not actionable. They serve as a basis if a second Category B complaint comes forward and the subcommittee finds evidence that supports that complaint, then we need to show that there was a first offense, but the council cannot take action until there is a second Category B complaint with a finding. So in the agreement, you will see in the footnote on page 2 that the Professional Regulation Subcommittee had found a Category B first offense. The conduct involved the officer giving a friend a ride home outside of his assigned patrol area while he was on duty, that he activated his cruiser blue lights while providing that ride home without a reason to do so, a legitimate law enforcement reason to do so, and that he was not entirely truthful when questioned about the incident. That was his first conduct complaint found by the subcommittee, and he does not contest that there's evidence to support that if we had to prove that at a future hearing. His second Category B conduct, which is the docket number before you, again, while on duty, the officer in uniform and with his cruiser on his way home, but still on duty, stopped to engage in personal business that was to such an extent that it would have interfered with his ability to perform his duties. The Vermont State Police investigated this, found that he would not have been available if he had been called during this time, and that this was, and submitted this as a complaint to the council. The Professional Regulation Subcommittee found that his unavailability amounted to gross professional misconduct as defined by our statute. Council members will note that what he was doing is not in the agreement, and that is quite purposeful. In that, what he was doing during that time on its own, if he was not on duty, would not be the basis for any form of violation within our statute. And the value add to adding what he was doing would only serve to potentially embarrass or shame the officer, potentially his family, and not add to that he had violated 3 different policies of the Vermont State Police by being unavailable while on duty and not able to perform his duty. So that was a very intentional decision for this officer, presents this to you, stating that he admits that there is evidence that would support this conduct complaint, that he violated these policies and that it was a gross professional misconduct complaint. But to get to this agreement, what he was doing was not included within this. The Professional Regulation Subcommittee, seeing a pattern of behavior between the 2 Category B complaints, felt that it exhibited a lack of professionalism, a lack of boundaries, and recommended that I seek an agreement that resulted in a permanent revocation of the officer's certification. The respondent officer has agreed to the permanent revocation of his certification. He had a level 3 certification. He agrees to have that permanently revoked. And again, he agrees through this stipulated agreement that if we were to proceed to a hearing, that there is evidence that would substantiate the Category B second offense. And if necessary, if we needed to argue that there is also evidence to support his Category B first offense. A few factors that I would like the council to consider when weighing whether to accept this agreement. The officer resigned from his agency a few months after the complaints were investigated. He resigned in January of 2020. He has not worked in law enforcement since that time. His certification expired in January of 2023. This case, again, remembering that the activity occurred in 2019 and was submitted to the council in February of 2020, this case happened to track through the council as the council was discussing and deciding what the due process rights were or are for a Category B first offense. Since this essentially creates a predicate offense, what sort of notice does an officer deserve, and ability to refute that court Category B first offense? Those conversations were going on as these 2 cases tracked through the council and the Professional Regulation Subcommittee. As such, because of those conversations and administrative changes, this case has been substantially delayed in coming to an agreement and coming before you. So I would like the council just to note that it is now over 5 years since the underlying incidents had taken place. If this matter were to proceed to the hearing, the officer may have arguments to raise about notice. He may have arguments about the delay. The delay in bringing this before you harms both sides in that we may have some issues procuring witnesses due to the age of the incident. Those issues are not insurmountable, and I just present them to you as a factor that they potentially might be time consuming if we did need to bring this to a hearing. Again, not insurmountable, but an issue to consider. With all of that before you, I would ask that you, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. As Chair Clements mentioned, if the questions go beyond the 4 corners of the agreement before you, we would need to move into executive session. This stipulated agreement was reached before a notice of hearing. So again, if your questions go beyond the scope of the agreement, we would just need to move into executive session. If there are no questions, or even after questions, I would ask that the council accept this agreement for this officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. So I think the way that we need to proceed on this is to have discussion about this. I'd like to have a motion in regard to accept the stipulation agreement. That will open up discussion, and as council has noted, if the discussion goes beyond the document that you've been presented, then we will have to move into executive session to have that discussion and reach some conclusion. In that executive session, Wesley Lawrence will be acting as legal counsel for the council for the council. So, having said that, do we have a motion to approve, accept the stipulation order? I see Jen Frank has moved such. Do we have a second for that? Amanda Garces has seconded the motion. Okay. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. If there are questions pertaining to the document and the description that Council McManus has provided, now is the opportunity. I'll open the floor to that discussion. I can't see everybody, but I'm not seeing any hands. So, do we feel that you've had adequate time or adequate understanding? If that is the case, I'm willing to proceed to a vote on the motion. Last call. Okay, seeing none, then we have a motion before us to accept the stipulation agreement as presented in case 2020 S53. All of those in favor signify by saying aye, raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Those opposed signify. Do we have any abstentions?
Yes, I'm going to abstain due to the VTA's involvement with this case.
Okay, thank you. We have one abstention. Okay, the motion passes. It would be to
Sorry,
accept
there-
the,
Just
Pardon?
just on record, Kareem Chapman, Jennifer Frank, and Trevor Whipple also abstain. So 4 abstentions.
okay. Do we have, then I presume we have a majority.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The motion passes. Thank you for the deliberation and work of the committee on this matter. We will now move ahead. Amanda, is that your vote or?
No, I do have a
Okay.
quick question on the
Oh.
abstentions, what the PRSC is, and just kind of like in the PRS, just like the connection will be great to just know.
I can speak to that. Per the legislative write-up, the professional regulations subcommittee members who forward the consideration are not allowed to vote in the final vote. Those abstentions, both Trevor Whipple, Kareem Chapman, and myself, we all sit on that committee, so we're not legally allowed to vote on final determinations.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks for the clarification. Okay, moving on, we have some rules. These were some activities that I know have been discussed, some changes, and that certainly we were on some previous agendas. I will again turn it over to Council McManus to walk us through that. You should have also received prior to the meeting, there was a nice summary that went out, Lindsay had sent out regarding what the changes were in regard to those rules. So I will turn it over to Kim.
Thank you, Chair. Before we dive into rules, just a huge thank you to the Act 56 Subcommittee and the Rule Committee, who have done a lot of work in very little time and have given a lot of time to get that work done. So thank you to subcommittee members for that. The two committees, Act 56 Subcommittee and Rules Committee, worked on the code of conduct rules that we're going to review. And then the Rules Committee worked on the A-RIDE rules after the council had provided them a recommendation on how to move forward on that. I think the best way to proceed, I'm going to go in the order that the email was sent out. So we'll go in the order of subject rather than in the order of rules necessarily. So the first thing excuse me, let me step back a moment. What we'll hopefully be asking you after we run through this review is an approval of this edited version of our rules so that I can begin the rulemaking process, which will take 2 to 3 months, hopefully 2 months, once I get started on that. And during that rulemaking process, there is room in there to make edits as issues come up. So the process between ourselves and the ICAR and LCAR, there is room and back and forth there after there's a public period for comment. So while I hope the rules before you are essentially done and there won't be a ton of back and forth with the committees, you may see something a month from now and realize like, oh, we need to change that word or we need to add a sentence, and that is doable. So I just want to put that on your radar. But this would begin the process to filing the paperwork to have these rules amended and or added to our rules. So with that said, the first issue before you is the language for A-RIDE. The Rules Committee decided for A-RIDE to put the A-RIDE rules in 2 spots. So we have Rule 22, which is on page 14. We added the rule for A-RIDE to specialized training standards. To do that, we did a little editing to the rule, and that's why you will see, if everyone's on Rule 22, that K-9 teams, that's simply an added title. The language that follows below K-9 teams has not changed from our past rule. We just provided it a title so that we could then add B. And what you now see in C is the old B. So there's a subtitle for K-9 teams added to A, and then B is the advanced roadside impaired driving enforcement rule. I will not read it out loud to you. It's all before you. Does anyone have any questions about that language addition or any concerns? All right. And again, if something pops up in mind a little later, feel free to raise your hand and circle back. So this is the rule requiring A-RIDE. You see the one exception. If an officer has higher training, which is DRE training, we would not have them go back to do A-RIDE. The second part of the A-RIDE recommendation that had been forwarded to the Rules Committee is that there are a number of law enforcement officers who do not engage in traffic enforcement at all, or rarely ever in their role. And so it had been recommended that there be some type of indefinite waiver so that officers who know that that's not the primary purpose or even a regular course of business could request to not need to take A-RIDE. The Rules Committee looked at this and looked at training waivers, which is Rule 23, and thought through that there potentially are other areas where something similar could come up, that an officer that something could be required maybe down the road by the legislature that doesn't apply to all officers, and it would make sense to potentially have an indefinite waiver in that scenario. And so the Rules Committee added the language in I to Rule 23 that allows the Waiver Committee to approve an officer for an indefinite waiver. Some important things that the Rules Committee added there, since they made this general and not to ARIDE, they wanted to make sure that there were some additional guidelines for the Waiver Committee. And those include that the Waiver Committee, if it issues this indefinite waiver, must outline the circumstances that support the granting of an indefinite waiver, and the Waiver Committee must inform an officer what circumstances would void an indefinite waiver. The ARIDE example, the ARIDE issue is the perfect example of this. If an agency head decided to step down from being agency head and wanted to be back as a patrol officer, had previously had an indefinite waiver, but now is out regularly engaging in traffic enforcement and had not previously had ARIDE, they would no longer have this waiver, and that would be laid out in the indefinite waiver by the Waiver Committee. The Rules Committee thought it was important, since again, this is more open-ended of what the Waiver Committee potentially could offer as an indefinite waiver. The Rules Committee added that the Waiver Committee will provide the council an annual report of the indefinite waivers granted in a calendar year. So the council will see what, if any, indefinite waivers are presented. You will no doubt in the first report see a lot of ARIDE waivers that go through. But if there are any others, you would see under what circumstances those were being granted. And then there could be a dialogue between the council and the Waiver Committee if the council found any issue with that. So that is how the Rules Committee tackled that second part of ARIDE, and they voted to recommend this language to the council. Are there any questions or concerns? And again, Rules Committee members, please jump in if you feel like I missed anything with either two that have been presented so far. I see Sheriff Anderson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheriff Anderson.
One piece that the Rules Committee was somewhat indifferent on, and so we included it with an opportunity for discussion if anyone wanted to have it. In the very first line of subsection I, the council's Waiver Committee may, in limited circumstances, is the in limited circumstances where we said, well, what are those circumstances? And so using ARIDE as a lens, it was, okay, we're kind of looking at the people who don't work in traffic operations. This could be agency heads. It could be investigators tied to the medical board. It could be the AG's office, a variety of niche areas where it makes sense, as opposed to a constraint saying only X number of these waivers can be granted or not granted. It's kind of vague, which is where we were like, we don't know if we like it or don't like it. But our intent is to say this should not just be a carte blanche. I don't want to do this training, so we're requesting an indefinite waiver because I don't feel like it. We also were kicking around where are the circumstances where ARIDE is necessary. And so an example being someone who does traffic enforcement out on I-91. Makes sense. Route 7 makes sense. What about boats? What about ATVs? So we started kind of venturing into all these different questions where it seemed that we could put human minds to solving the problem versus trying to codify this in rule, which then just kind of started creating its own new issues and nuances and workarounds that we were really just trying to say, no, we want a system that makes sense. We don't want this to be employed carte blanche. And so that's kind of where that was going. And so that's where we came up with this system, which would I won't get too deep into the logistics of it, but the executive director approves the forms in which this is submitted. So we would be asking the executive director to basically create a framework for the waiver committee to basically say, we're granting this under these circumstances. And in the circumstances that you go outside, it voids it. So we kind of wanted to have a framework built around it for the waiver committee with common sense reigning supreme. And then the final concern that we had is more specific to the APA process, which Attorney McManus can speak about way better than I can. But in short, kind of an overarching principle of the APA is that waivers should not be a commonality. I don't know if that's the correct phrase, but basically, when we start coming across these things that should happen regularly, that we probably should have rules codifying what the circumstances are. And so this is kind of saying that there's a report back, a callback for the council to hear like, hey, these things are going on, and maybe this is happening so frequently, we actually now need to create a rule so that we are compliant with the APA.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff. Yeah, and as Kim had pointed out, there is that process, opportunities for questions, and some things may come up in the APA process, the dual process that it goes through over the next several months. But that's a good point that you make. Part of this will be empirical in the sense that what's the demand vector on this? Is there a lot coming before the council for waivers? And if so, does it warrant future clarification in adjusting the rules to be more specific about the waivers? But I think I understand the need, the way that it's written in terms of limited circumstances with some level of latitude very early in the adoption. It's very difficult to estimate exactly what that demand is going to be for waivers. Further questions for either the committee or council on this particular change? We have a second. I guess I'll defer to the committee and council or see what your desire is. Was the desire to vote on these separately, the A-RIDE and the code of conduct, or as a package? We have any feedback on that? I think we can entertain them as one package. Sheriff Anderson.
If there's no contention, I think a package makes sense. If people are feeling uneasy, it would make sense to me that we separate them because as we were continuing through the different rules, we would navigate to other supporting rules, which Kim hasn't spoken about some of the minor changes, but we started identifying things as the conversation proceeded on where it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. An example being as part of the Rule 23, the waivers, we noticed that things like review were conferred upon the executive director of the committees, but approval never was. And it's like, well, the intent was always approval, but the language needs to be cleaned up. So we tried to do some housekeeping amongst this while we were going through the logic of the way the system should work.
Okay, great. Then if there are no, I see it. Was there a question or hand up or down? I saw a flash on my screen. Chief Frank.
I think just for the good of the order, I would hope that this becomes an exception and not the norm. I struggle a little bit with the legislature saying everyone has to have this, and then we recognizing this doesn't work and this doesn't work for law enforcement. So now we have to create all these rules and exemptions and waivers to try to work around that. And I think it sets also a poor example for us from like comments of heads of law enforcement agencies. I might not do traffic a lot, but I hope that I'm still out there and representing and doing the job. Also, when I'm approving reports, I need to know what's in the training so I can properly approve reports to make sure all the elements are in there. So I guess I just wanted, for the good of the order, say that I hope that this process is more of an exception and not the norm. I get that we're trying to fix a legislative snafu, but just something for us to keep in mind moving forward.
Yeah, great observation. And I think, we'll have a legislative session coming up, and be wary of some of these impacts, as I'm sure all of you are. The sometimes disjuncture between what happens legislatively and what will happen empirically on the street, if you will, in the implementation. Okay, if there were any other observations, we could move on. Kim, could you walk us through the Rule 28 edition?
Yes, though I do just want to highlight for the record to make sure before we leave Rule 23, as Sheriff Anderson noted, as we were adding the language to training waivers to address the A-RIDE issue, we did see some housekeeping matters, or the Rules Subcommittee saw some housekeeping matters, and you will see those changes reflected in subsection A, B, and D. And the addition is that after the language, or sorry, for A and B, the words "and approve" were added after review, just to make it incredibly clear that when the folks are reviewing it, that they have the power to approve it as far as waivers. And then D, again, just to make sure it was clear that the waiver committee and executive director may refer a waiver request to the council for its approval. Previously, the wording was, again, for review, which leaves a little ambiguity there, just reviewing a matter. So the Rules Committee wanted to clarify that. So there are those changes in Rule 23. The substantial change is the addition of Rule 23I. Okay, leaving A-RIDE. The Code of Conduct. You have heard us chat about the Code of Conduct at a few council meetings now. As the council will recall, the legislature passed the recommendation that the Act 56 subcommittee had submitted last year to change the definition of Category B conduct. And in changing it, creating a code of conduct, a statewide policy code of conduct that takes Category B away, away from local law enforcement, being tied to local law enforcement policies. Category B conduct still covers statewide policies, but it will no longer be attached or tethered to local law enforcement policies. So when that legislation passed, the legislature said, you will now, council, own this policy. You need to create the code of conduct, and you need to create rules around the code of conduct. This is what the Act 56 subcommittee has been working on all summer, brought it over to the Rules Committee for further review. And before you is the language being asked for your consideration regarding the rules around the code of conduct. So we needed rules that focused on the content of the code, the implementation, which is fairly straightforward in that once it goes into effect, law enforcement officers need to adhere to it. The bulk of this rule, and probably the most complicated part of this rule, is how the code of conduct can be modified in the future. It was very important to, I would say, both subcommittees, and subcommittee members can correct me if I'm wrong, but very important that this code of conduct can be changeable in the future, but change would need to take a thorough process that allowed time in between forwarding a motion to change it and when it could indeed be changed. So essentially, what's before you is a two-step process for a modification to be allowed to go forward with the code of conduct. And the intent behind this is that, again, that this would, one, slow the process down, two, make sure that everyone involved, our law enforcement stakeholders, our non-law enforcement stakeholders, all had time to process any change to the code, and then time for the council to consider any of that feedback so that everyone on the council feels that they're able to make an informed decision about any change to the code and that impact that that change might have on law enforcement. It takes a read or two to go through to understand it. The important thing about rules is we put them into rules so that we can all go and find them in the same place. So we definitely don't expect anyone to be able to recite the rules to modifying the code of conduct when you're at, your next dinner party. That would be impressive if you could. We don't expect it. If in the future we do have a modification to the code, I expect all of us to have to pull out our rules and take a look and make sure we are following them. And I say all that in that one piece of feedback during this was, isn't this a little complicated? And the answer is yes, it is a little complicated, but we think there's importance to that, it being complicated. The subcommittees did not want to make it, again, too easy to change the code. We want this code to be something that the public can rely on, law enforcement can rely on, and again, that there's a substantial process if we change it in the future. Are there any questions or concerns, or again, subcommittee members on either subcommittee, anything else you would like to add to the language before the council?
Trevor.
I don't want
yours.
to add, just want to add comment, and thank you, Kim, and members of the committee that worked on this. We toiled a bit, and I think I believe credit goes to Sheriff Anderson on process, but we tried to really look at process that was already being used in our state and drew some similarities to creation or change of an ordinance, a local town ordinance, where we don't want things of that magnitude done willy-nilly, without time, without option for stakeholders to weigh in. This code of conduct will be, it'll be serious, it'll be meaningful. All officers will have to follow it. They'll have to be trained on it. They'll be held accountable to it day in and day out, 24 hours a day, as you notice in the rules. This has strong application to off-duty conduct that directly applies to the profession. So it's incredibly meaningful work, and work that we just didn't want changed in one session or without robust discussion and without advertising out that if there is an intent to change this, that we want all potential stakeholders, to include the public, to be noticed and have the opportunity to weigh in should they. So Kim's right, it looks a little cumbersome. I think it probably is by design. It's not designed as a stopgap. It's not designed as an impediment to change. It's just designed as a means to get to meaningful, well-thought change should the need arise.
Great, thanks for that observation, Trevor. That was my read on it too. That it was a thorough process that would result in slower, more thoughtful change rather than reactionary change relative to whatever circumstance might come up. So, do we have any other observations or questions about that document that you received in the new section for Rule 28? Do we feel that the conversation is thorough enough to vote on adoption of the changes? Kim, I think that was a hand. It was a pen, but
sorry, my real hand, not my virtual hand. So before we move forward, Chair, there's one more piece to present to you. As mentioned in my email, out to the council. The Rules Committee was met yesterday. And I don't know what went out this morning as far as the most up-to-date version. Lindsay, I apologize. That went out. Okay. In the most up-to-date version of the rules to you, the Rules Committee, when we were working on the new Rule 28, when we were looking at wording around entire council, members present, getting into terms that have very specific meaning within Robert's Rules of Order, the Rules Committee raised the question of, we follow Robert's rules, but where does it say we need to, or do we have to, or, what, we all follow it, but are we clear in the future that that's what we're following and that those terms hold the meaning per Robert's Rules of Order, which was how the subcommittee was looking at very specific language in Rule 28. So doing a little subcommittee members and myself doing some quick research, realized that within our statute, our governing statute, we are directed to create rules about process, but it doesn't say that we have to follow Robert's rules. It also doesn't say that in open meeting law, but it does, some statutes do particularly state when Robert's rules are being used for certain towns or boards. That is explicitly stated in some statutes. And the Rules Committee subcommittee thought it would be valuable to make it clear in our council rules that notwithstanding any exceptions that we call out in our rules or anything that would be against law, that we as a council follow Robert's Rules of Order. And so with that in mind, language has been added to Rule 4, is being recommended to you in Rule 4A. That the last sentence in Rule 4A states, unless otherwise specified in council rule, the most recent version of Robert's Rules of Order shall govern all meetings of the council except when in conflict with law. So that was just one last housekeeping matter that the Rules Committee would like to recommend to you and to put in this bundle of changes for us to start the rulemaking process on this fall. So with that, Chair, those are all the additions, all the changes to the rules for the council. Thank you.
Okay, I'm thinking the wheels are turning here about whether we need, and I might be inclined to have a motion to add that to the package that was previously delivered, since it hadn't been warned or hadn't been sent previously. I don't think it's I'm going into my Robert's Rules a background here. Do we have a written? I know you read it verbally. I think what I'd like to do is ask for a motion to add that to the package that was previously distributed. Folks, Sheriff Anderson.
I will make that motion, Chair.
Okay. Do we have a second for that? Okay, I see Scott Lavelli got his hand up there quickly. So we have that. And again, just let's could you read that again, Kim?
Yes.
The addition of the sentence, the motion would be to add the
Yes.
amendment to Rule 4.
To Rule 4A, the language added, and I can put it in the chat in just a moment, unless otherwise specified in council rule, comma, the most recent version of Robert's Rules of Order shall govern all meetings of the council except when in conflict with the law.
Okay, thank you. We have that. Any discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, hearing none. All of those in favor of adding that to the proposed rule changes that we'll be voting on today, signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, I will consult the Lindsay who sees all and knows all that I believe the motion is passed. Okay, now I think we can entertain a motion to adopt the rules, the proposal on the rules changes as amended. I see Mark Anderson is moving that.
So moved.
So moved. Do we have a second? Trevor Whipple, second. Saw the hand first. Okay, any further discussion on the motion? I think Kim provided a great overview, and the comments, I think, filled in a lot of the blanks. Any questions we had? If we are ready, then we'll proceed to vote on that. All of those in favor of the motion as amended signify by raising your hand or saying aye.
Right.
Aye.
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 Any,
Aye.
any opposed? Signify by such. Any abstentions? Okay, seeing none, the motion to adopt the rule changes has been adopted. And we got to do a little exercise in Robert's rules. So, there we go. Always fun. All right, moving on to the next item on our agenda, interim executive director Brickell. What do you have for us today?
Well, mine fortunately will be very easy. No council actions that are required. And it's just a verbal update simply because the document that I wanted to provide earlier went through several modifications yesterday, and we got the final version of it late yesterday afternoon. So moving forward, I just wanted to bring to the council, we had mentioned at our last meeting that we were going to have the pre-academy workout that was going to be designed by O2X for folks that are coming into the 119th Academy, but also make that available to all law enforcement officers statewide. So we did finally get that document finalized late yesterday afternoon, and I will send it out to all agency heads at the conclusion of this meeting. And then we are also going to put it on our website under the level 3 training. We're going to create a different section on our website for officer wellness where this information will go as well. It's a PDF that basically starts out with formulas for individual recruits to set goals for themselves. It includes nutrition guidelines on hydration, breathing exercises, sleep, nutrition, and then separate exercise techniques. And then it gets into a 4-week program that individual folks can use to prepare themselves to get ready to come into the academy. Each of those 4-week programs has a list of exercises that have an explanation for what the exercise consists of and how it's done. And some of them have photographs to help illustrate how those exercises is done. I think that this is really going to be helpful if folks take advantage of it. This is one of the advantages of this contract that we have with O2X, is to make the transition for folks that are going to be coming into a full-time basic program to prepare themselves for 4 weeks ahead of time coming in. It's not something that an agency has to hire somebody 4 weeks ahead of time to prepare, but they can make this information available to their future recruits coming in so that they can best be prepared to come in and be successful when they get here. I can say that we're moving really well with O2X. We have had such limited times where we have had to take recruits to either the doctor or the hospital. And we've also diagnosed, O2X have diagnosed some concerns where we've had some recruits that have some pre-existing injuries some of which were really not identified in their medical packet prior to coming here, but have been identified to our staffer on board. And he's been able to make sure that they have continued to participate in the PT program while not aggravating those injuries. So we're excited about this work. It's been really successful so far, and we hope to have some good data at the conclusion of this to kind of show where we have made those changes and where it's been impactful on the recruit. So that's just a matter of an update, nothing for you to have to vote on. You'll get that later today through an email, and that will also go out to all agency heads by the end of the day today.
I'm sorry, I'm off mic.
Yeah.
Anything else, Chris?
That's it for me today, just that brief update.
Okay, great. We will move on then to our last our last item, the acting executive director, the hire for the permanent executive director. I'll thank the search committee for their good work. I joined that after the committee had been formed in July. But I would like Karen Transgard Scott to, as chair of that committee, provide a briefing for you all on what took place. After we've done that, this is a personnel matter. So we'll be moving in to executive session to discuss the hire. It is the council's role to hire the executive director. So, Karen, could you give us an update on the activities of the committee and how we've gotten to this point?
Sure, I'm very happy to. Thank you, Chairman Clements. And I want to join you in thanking our committee. It was an ad hoc committee. Folks volunteered to participate in this process. And so just so the full council knows who was on that committee, my thanks go out to Domenica Padula from the Attorney General's office, to Trevor Whipple from the League of Cities and Towns, to Jennifer Frank, the chief in Windsor, to Roger Moroku, the sheriff in Lamoille, to Lindsay DeVerge representing the academy staff, and to you, Chairman Clements, for joining the committee after we'd already gotten our work started. We did start working the week of July 16th. And you will remember, council members, that we determined that we would issue a limited posting within the council for time limited 2 weeks, and we would accept applications from staff currently working at the council, or I'm sorry, at the academy. We worked with the Department of Human Resources, which they were so great and easy to work with. I just want to mention that they did a terrific job. They helped us get everything moving from the administrative end, and so we could make sure that we were fulfilling all the legal requirements for posting a position and accepting applications. So we did post the position, and during the posting period, the committee members came together and we developed a work plan that included some target dates for deadlines and when we wanted to get this job rolling and done. So I just want to mention that we determined right away that we essentially do 3 interviews, although only 2 of those interviews directly involved any of the candidates. The first interview was we submitted a series of essay questions to the candidate. We did get 1 application from Chris Burkell. We submitted these essay questions to him. These were in-depth, complex questions, a series of them that he responded to in writing. I want to make a note that he did respond to those questions thoroughly and in advance of the deadline. Then we scheduled a meeting, an interview with the candidate, Chris. We did that via Teams, and the committee came together. We asked another series of questions that would be characterized, I would say, as being a little more traditional interview questions, not so much the in-depth questions that we had asked him to respond to in writing. And then later that week, we all gathered at the police academy, had a lovely lunch on Lindsay. Thank you, Lindsay, for lunch. And we sat down with Chris and had a less formal interview. We grilled him. We asked him some questions that were important to us, but we also had a really wonderful conversation. Following that, the committee stayed in place at the Academy. We had a long conversation about Chris's responses, and we are prepared today to offer our unanimous support for moving him forward as the permanent executive director.
Thank you, Karen. I would add that it was probably a little bit more than a conversation with Chris in the interview. We did grill him pretty good. So
We did.
yeah, it wasn't just for those just for the council's sake. It wasn't pro forma. They were very in depth and continued questions based on his written responses in our prior virtual interview that we did. So it was a great opportunity to follow that up under a different environment, if we will.
Yeah, Bill, I appreciate you mentioning that. I think that the committee from the very start approached this process with the assumption that we wanted to do our diligence and that we wanted this process to be filled with integrity, both for because we're representing the interests of the full council, but also for the sake of anybody who's applying for the job.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that thorough update on the process and kind of what happened with the committee and the search. Just to let everybody know what the steps are, what will happen is that we will need to act as a council today, and based on that action of the council, I will forward the council's action to the governor in regard to the process of appointment. So this is an important step for us here, and I'm ready to. If there are any questions of the process, I'll entertain a motion, and then go into executive session to discuss any detail. We need to do that because of the personnel nature. So I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session. Unless my counsel tells me I can just go into executive session.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session.
So moved. A second.
Just
I see,
a point of order.
oh, yes. Yes,
And
sir.
maybe a question for Kim, do we need to list the exception under 1 VSA 313?
Yeah, I believe the chair gave the reason, but it would be preferable in the motion to explicitly state. And so Amanda, you could amend your motion to say to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters. And if you have the statute right in front of you, I don't have the screen up.
I don't have it.
And
The
I
one
assume we have to,
VSA, Mark.
I assume we have to invite Lindsay too, because she's not a member of the council, and you, Kim.
Yes.
Correct.
Lindsay
Any
and,
invitations as
and
well.
Kim is legal counsel. Yes.
All right. Maybe Chief Anderson can say the motion since you know the statute right there. So I withdraw my motion.
So I'll move
Okay.
that we enter into executive session pursuant to 1 VSA 313A3 regarding the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public official or employee, inviting Lindsay Thaverge and Kim McManus.
I
Thank you.
second that
Well put.
motion.
Okay. Amanda seconds the motion. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
any opposition? Any abstention? Okay, it looks like the motion has passed. So Lindsay, you'll have to direct us on what we do to go into executive session.
Okay, I just sent a link for executive session. If you want to join that meeting, you can remain in this one without exiting. And when you end on the executive session link, it will bring you back into this one. You just join meeting again.
Okay. It's fast. Kudos to Lindsay for organizing this technology, and this is one of the smoothest transitions that I've ever been in, moving from session to session.
It only took her 6 months to teach me how to just go on pause and not end a session and restart a new one, but hey, I got it.
With most technology, I end up doing things that end up being the right result, but I'm never sure exactly how or why. So I'm not going to ask any questions. I just do what Lindsay says. Okay, I'm waiting to see if we're all back. We're coming back. I guess there's
Almost there.
the in and out, right? Yeah, we're coming in. They're popping in. I'll wait for Lindsay to. Do we have everybody back?
That always confused me because his camera's off.
Yes.
Just about. We have quorum though, so we can continue.
We have quorum. Okay, hopefully
Oh,
we
there we
won't lose anybody on the walk back from school here. So, okay. We are back in public session on the matter of appointing Chris Brickell as the executive director of the academy, the Vermont Criminal Justice Council. I will entertain a motion to that effect.
I'll make
So
that
moved.
motion. Oh, sorry,
Nope,
Mark, go
Give
ahead.
it to Karen. Karen can have it.
Karen. Okay, the motion is moved by Karen and seconded.
Second, Kareem Chapman.
Okay, then we have a second, so we have a motion on the floor. If there any further discussion that's not of a personnel matter, I will move to the vote. And only council members can vote on this, not the public. All of those in favor of the motion to appoint Chris Brickell as Executive Director of the Criminal Justice Council signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Having said that, the motion passes. Congratulations, Chris. Great.
Thank you very much. I have to say this is a little bit overwhelming. If I could say just a couple of things, I'd like to thank the hiring committee for their inquiry, their questions, and for the good conversation that I think that we had during our last in-person interview. I'd also like to thank the chair who joined us midstream and didn't know what he was getting into, but quickly started paddling and figured out the dynamics of where he needed to be and help finish leading this process. And to the council as a whole for just showing up and participating and being a part of this process. And I would be sorely acting on bad behavior if I didn't give a special thanks to the staff here who literally have a lot of patience with me, totally support me on a regular daily basis, and without them couldn't do this job. So thank you to all.
Great. Thank you, Chris. We're looking forward to a long and productive association and leadership with the academy. So it's great to move you into the more permanent role with the council, and so we can roll up our sleeves and start moving and continue moving forward. I shouldn't say start. There's a lot of momentum, a lot of good stuff going on. So I think the future is bright, and we've got some great things ahead of us. So I don't have any further comments for for the council, and then we'll be meeting again. And I know we'll have some more activity coming up. I think our next meeting is October 2nd, 3rd, 4th. Okay, I was close. No, don't have the calendar in front of me.
You were right. It's the second. I'm sorry. It's
The
second.
Okay, it is the
Second.
second. Okay. So we'll see everybody on the 2nd, and we'll have that agenda out in advance, and the good work of the council's continuing, and I'm out. I'm open. You want to shoot me an email? You want to meet? I'm trying to get out. My goal over this first year is to meet all of the council members individually. I've started to do that. I haven't been able to move at a rocket pace, but we're progressing along. So you may see me out and about, meeting with folks, and I look forward to getting to know you all a little bit better over the coming months. And particularly as we head into the legislative session, I realize it's September, and that means one thing, that elections are up, and the first Tuesday in January, we know what will be happening. So, and it will impact the work of the council. I'm sure it will in some way. So looking forward to working with you in that domain. But again, feel free to reach out. I am in I believe, it's been several weeks now, but I am on the bill.clements@partner.vermont.gov. So I am in that system. I know some folks have some of my other emails that I've used in the past, Norwich in particular, but all my council communications and activity will be on the partner site. So if you want to reach me, you can find me there, and happy to talk at any time. Having said all of that, I will certainly entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, we don't want to leave.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Karen, and seconded by Sheriff Anderson, I think approved by acclaim. So see you all again very soon. Have a great late September here. Bye-bye.
care.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks.